This is the second segment, the Members Hour here, together with Clif. Hi, welcome back, everybody. A big part of the worries that you raised specifically regarding some of Fulford's claims, Clif, specifically was about the radiation bit here now and what he states about Fukushima. Why don't we discuss a little bit, what's going on with this and some of the things that you see unfolding based on your language analysis. I mean, how bad is it? And as we hear, of course, it could get worse pretty quick, actually.
Well, it's very terrible here on the west coast of the U.S. I bought my first Geiger counter from Bob Lazar, UFO Area 51 fame, right?
Sure.
Okay, got it from him in 2003. He's a erudite, helpful individual. I was already fairly cognizant of what I was doing because I'd had some years of laboratory work, but he aided me in the choice and directed my screening and stuff, and I set out establishing a base. So from the year 2003 to the year 2005, when I just got bored with it, our background radiation up here at 47 degrees north latitude, 22 degrees or 22 minutes north latitude was one disintegration, one radioactive click every 7 or 8 minutes. It rarely exceeded 8 minutes and was rarely less than, it also rarely exceeded the range of 7. So it's usually in that range of those 2 minutes. And so now bear in mind that was steady from 2003 through 2 whole years, even through the period of time when we had large amounts of incoming gamma rays and so on. Now, at that time, I was not specifically hunting for gamma. I was only doing specific radiation studies. I won't go into the details, but I got a nice background, generalized background knowledge at that point. Now I've got the ability to do alpha, beta, and gamma studies. So my ability now is heightened. So we can't say that everything is the same, right? Mm-hmm. You got to be aware of this as you go along.
Yeah.
I'm now much more attuned to it and this kind of thing. But if I turn on my Geiger counter right now, or as I did earlier today, barely 2.5 hours ago, we were running at about 74 clicks a minute.
Wow, that's an increase.
Disintegrations.
What does that mean, though, for people who don't know the stuff with the Geiger counters there?
Okay, a Geiger counter is a funny little instrument. It's got this tube of a gas in it, and as a piece of radioactive material, is like this happy little atom that just throws off its bits. It's in party mood. It just throws off bits of stuff every now and then. And so these Geiger counters, they just sit around as tubes waiting for a little bit of radioactive material to come zinging by, and then they record it. As it goes through this little bit of gas, the gas molecules change their electrical potential and excite some other electrical gear, and a little bit is flipped and a signal goes off on your machine that goes bing, a little ping noise, a click. And so it happens every so often when you, through random happenstance, happen to have this little tube approximately 4 inches long, get in the contact and get hit by these disintegrations. So you understand it's not in any way, shape, or form a thorough examination of the radioactivity in your environment. You'd have to sweep your whole area repeatedly, continuously to understand what was going on. It's really a happenstance kind of a thing, and even then it's scary. Now, so back in 2003, I'd get one of these clicks every 7 or 8 minutes, telling me that a radioactive disintegration had happened, and it happened to strike my little monitor. And I was happy. I was happy as a clam. Oh, click. Hey, I got something, Well, all right. Well, now I'm not so happy.
Yeah.
Because I get those damn things all the time, because we are now, instead of getting one every 7 or 8 minutes, well, when Fukushima happened in the first month, it went from one every 7 or 8 minutes up to about 30 or 40 a minute, and I was very alarmed.
How quick? Do you remember how quick that was?
Sure. My viewpoint, I started checking almost immediately, and I started recording my first frightening day was on April. Well, I could actually go and look, but it was either April 13th or 14th.
Mm-hmm.
So barely a month later.
Wow,
a little over a month and 2 days.
Yeah.
Okay. Something like that. And it was so frightening. I had just at that point, I had these 2 guys, Kale and Lettuce, that were working for me, young kids, and I told them, we can't work outside today. I'm just too freaked out. We're at 40 clicks a minute, and it's coming down in the rain and the fog, so we just have to, so it started affecting our lives as of April of last year. And I did not understand what was going on at the time. or where I would be this period right now, because here we are at 70 and 80 clicks a minute, and that's a light day. When it rains, I can easily hit 240 disintegrations in a minute. And it's too late for me now, right? If I were attempting to avoid radiation, I should have left the West Coast within that 30-day period probably after Fukushima had happened and gone south of the equator. It's probably too late for most of the people across the United States and for a good portion of Europe relative to the exposure to Fukushima. We've had a number of hot spots here. I had something that was so hot, a piece of radioactivity. Bear in mind that within the first month, I also started sweeping the food. And I think it was 3 months later, we got a period that was so hot and my meter died. I don't know what caused it, but it peaked out one day and the little tube just gave up the ghost. So I had to get this new greater meter from Bob, and really got an education then about the gamma particles and all the rest of it. But there's various different kinds of radioactive material. And in the first period of time, there's the radioactive iodine, which at a light level, you can take potassium iodine and protect your thyroid against. If you're a kid, it doesn't matter to me. I'm 58 years old. Something that's going to kill me long before 30-year cancer does, right? But there's nothing that will protect you from the strontium and the cesium and so on. We're seeing people now, and I will give you anecdotal evidence. There's no statistics. No one's going to back it up, but it's rather odd that, our government denies that there's any radioactivity, and yet our local government here on the West Coast, our local governments are all now of a sudden testing all the seafood for radioactivity. It's rather odd that the federal government denies there's any exposure, yet I've got friends of mine that are avid hikers or skiers or snowboarders, so they're up at high altitudes, coming down with very rapid onset leukemia at very young ages.
Really?
Very strange, where they're healthy and then 30 days later they've got white blood cell counts well over 100,000, and they just can't figure out what's going on. They think they've got the stomach flu. They take them to the hospital and they keep them at the hospital because they're so freaked. And these are people who spend a lot of time at 6,500 feet or higher in our local Cascade Range or the Olympics and the marvelous hiking that's available. But it doesn't matter anymore because our local seafood is now polluted. I've been able to test with the new Geiger counter I've got the seafood levels around here. And I've also got friends of mine that work at local Fish and Wildlife. I worked for years in the habitat division of the Fish and Wildlife and IT support, writing software for the burgeoning digitization of our entire resource industry here in the West Coast, right? So I've got all these contacts within the fisheries world, and there's a lot of people that say, nope, I ain't going to eat that anymore. And these are avid fishermen that used to spend all their time not only working for the resource, but also catching it.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard from people in the U.S. Via email primarily who talked about they'd seen weird things in terms of stillborn and mutated calves. Things of this nature. I can't remember what it was. Was one animal was born with 8, 2 set of legs or 4 set of legs.
Sure. And that kind of thing, though. Okay, now you've got to be careful about the level of mutations because those always occur. We also have to be careful about mutations in animals because animals are a lot more sensitive to gamma level mutation, which can occur from space. And in fact, our primary level of gamma radiation is from space. So I'm of a tendency to think that, well, if we get an extraordinarily high level statistically, then I'll buy into this particular mutation being caused by the radiation from Fukushima. Okay. But you have to understand that in order for the DNA to be destroyed for that particular calf, you've got to go back into the DNA at a particular point in the process in order to get anything like a normal conception as a result of damaged DNA. You're much more likely to see radiation effects, which we're seeing all over the West Coast here, in plants, and much more likely to see it in the fast turnover life like seafood, right. Okay? Where the fishes go through cycles, in some fishes in as little as 6 weeks, or in some cases you've got long life seafood like, or not seafood, but sea life like octopi that will put off polyps for years. There you will see the mutations because the type of life they are, the polyp that puts off the completed jellyfish or other form will put off a mutated form of it more easily because of the nature of life it is, as opposed to the, if you will, the denser form that you find in the calves. Although I'm not discounting that we're going to start seeing that because there's cesium and strontium all over the place. On the other hand, though, I had this argument with a friend of mine the other day. He was saying, "Oh, yeah, you got to buy this," and I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure. You're going to spend an additional $1 for organic food when all the organic food is now covered with, 98,000 times the allowed level of aluminum." And what does organic mean in the age of chemtrails and Fukushima?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm of the opinion from the language I've got in the database that real soon we'll see an upsurge in a particular market within eBay and other online auction places, right? And you're going to see something that is basically like an outgrowth of the Mad Max movies, and you're going to see the pre-Fuk food. And you're going to see people like offering pre-Fukushima canned butter, $1,000 a kilogram.
Jeez.
You'll see pre-Fukushima canned milk, probably $1,000 a kilogram, powdered. And it'll just go on and on and on like that. And you'll see even seeds that have been stored pre-Fukushima offered at a premium.
High value commodities, yeah.
Correct. Because look at what's happening to the social constructs of the Japanese society now. If you read the Japanese newspapers and you read between the lines, you see there's been a huge change in the social order there. They have adopted at one level, a big chunk of their society has adopted the idea that we shall enforce at a group level absolute acceptance and ignoring of our particular state. Therefore, people that go into stores and try and root out non-radioactive food for their kids are being assaulted verbally and physically because they're not conforming to the social norm. This is very disturbing very disturbing trend.
Oh boy.
Doesn't argue health and long life for the Japanese to not face their condition. Right.
You have the accumulative effect, of course. If we talk about the seafood, fish, and stuff like that, like the bigger fish, like tuna, is the worst, obviously, because they accumulate. They eat the smaller fish, who eat the bigger fish, who eat, gets eaten rather by the bigger fish, and eventually you have an accumulation of the radiation in some of these bigger fish like tuna. So it's.
But that's not so much of an issue for us, I don't think. To be quite honest, I don't. As a vegetarian, it's not an issue for me anyway.
Yeah.
But the radioactivity in the sea is likely more of an issue for the Nemo and the space aliens that live in the sea than for us. What's going to kill all of the humans is going to be these ill winds. I've had them in the data since probably 2004. Without understanding what I was looking at, and still to the point where I even named them the ill winds and had the radioactive volcano and all of that. In previous Alta reports, and described the situation we're facing now a number of years ago. Even then, I didn't really grasp what we were looking at. I thought maybe it was going to be as a result of war, not recognizing that the Israelis were going to be, Zionists were going to be part and parcel of the destruction of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant that causes the situation we're in at the moment, right?
Oh, okay. We need to clarify that. Stuxnet and the connection to Israel. Tell us about that.
Stuxnet is an engineered, very complex group virus. It's a computer virus that was engineered by at least 120 people. A big effort, and it was put together by the Zionists. Whether it was actually, actually crafted in an Israeli Tel Aviv building, or it was done at Microsoft, is immaterial. It was done for the Zionists, by the Zionists, and it was let loose by the Zionists. It's designed to interfere with the Iranian nuclear effort. It's designed to destroy their power plants. The side effect is that the Daiichi power plant and one or two others use the same technology as the Iranians, and so the Stuxnet virus caused the Daiichi power plant in Fukushima to go batshit just at the time that the engineered tsunami hit and the engineered earthquake hit, and it caused a real problem there. Plus, there was this really strange. Unexplained, denied, and the fact that it's denied confirms it in my mind, appearance of a number of Israeli citizens with a device on the roof of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant number 2, I believe, that and the device itself, if you'll go online and look, resembles all kinds of interesting explosive devices for setting off larger explosions. And having gone through the War College with my dad in the 60s at Leavenworth, I'm very familiar with the types of material you need to cause nuclear problems, especially since they had to train everybody in the 60s in the military about Fat Man and Little Boy. That's what they used as their examples, to let them all know about all of this. And it's odd that it's or not odd, it's actually fitting that the technology used to do in the Fukushima Daiichi power plant is very similar to the in almost a copy of the ignition tube for the Fat Man nuke bomb that was the basic design that we had all through the early 60s. So it's like, proven technology, and they used it to destroy this nuclear power plant. Again, why would any kind of a being do this to our planet? I have no idea. Thus, I'm also thinking there's undoubtedly the hand of the alien agenda crap in this as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a reality that is not as we've been sold. Our reality is sold to us in one fashion, and it is anything but that. It is so complex that the intrigues of the Medicis and the Borgias over whose bastard son would be the next pope in the Middle Ages is nothing compared to what we're facing here. Harry Seldon in the Foundation trilogy series postulated a very complex empire that spanned 10,000 worlds, and you can imagine the politics that is involved there. And I frequently feel like that's what we're living in at the moment, with all these agendas, sub-agendas, cross-plots, secret wars, and all of that kind of crap going on. But Fukushima was a hit. Whether it was a hit on Japan or whether it was a hit on the West Coast, I don't know. I don't know who benefits from it, but I know who's suffering from it, and that's a lot of us. Our data shows that it's going to get a lot worse. At the moment, there are hints in the current data that I'm just now starting to examine that suggest that the next point of a lot worse is going to be July 10, and that we may find a giant, horrific explosion occurs in or around that period of time. If it does, the issue of radioactivity in our food is moot.
People have speculated another earthquake to hit the already bad situation, the reactor number 4, I believe it is, that this might basically cause it to topple over. Do you think that it would be another earthquake, or are we talking about something else? I mean, again, I actually do want to.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
They could drive a Volkswagen Bug with a half a gallon of gas in the back of it into the reactor, and it would probably do it in. It's very tenuous at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
My data suggests it will occur with some hints in the model space that it'll occur in July, and that this is the beginning of the great harvest of souls that the Mayans talked about. And I can easily believe it. I'm sitting here in a level where my radioactivity is now several thousands of times higher than it was a few years back, less than 10 years back. And so I see with one or two more, and most of this increase in radioactivity is less than a year old. And so I see with one or two more events, the certainty of my death from radiation in 5 years is pretty good. Because within the first month, it was estimated that everybody in Seattle, within the first month of the Fukushima accident in 2011, on March 11, it was estimated that everybody in Seattle had had the opportunity to breathe in at least 15 hot spots. It takes only one to cause a fatal cancer. A certain type of radioactivity in the form of, the heavier element, strontium, or, God forbid, plutonium, and you're toast. You're dead within days. You'll be bleeding out. Strontium longer, but plutonium within days. So the certainty of the great death wave is here when Fukushima goes. The data I have, the forecast, which admittedly I'm wrong a lot, but you got to give me credit where credit's due. Occasionally I get things, blondes on boats, right? That was just an out of the blue kind of should not have occurred stellar example. So that when we're right, we really are right. And maybe I'm right again. And if that's the case, it'll be July 10th. So if anybody is looking for a deadline to, beat feet below the equator to get a few more months of life out of the here, then my way of thinking is you'll know by July 10th how long you've got. If there's a big explosion on July 10th, you have probably less than 30 days to get south of the equator.
Now, go ahead. Go ahead and finish that point, Cliff.
Oh, I was going to say, the issue again is that it takes 30 days for the gas clouds to hit the U.S., and then it'll take an additional total of 18 weeks for it to permeate the northern hemisphere.
Great news. Yeah. Well, obviously, I want to talk about some of your suggestions for a possible fix on this. I know you don't answer whys and all that, but I just have to mention it. What is going on with the international community, if you will, on this question? Why aren't the best minds in the world working on fixing this thing once and for all, and actually try to do something about it? Is there any level
Well,
of...
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of hints in our data that it's not healthy to do so. 2 people recently, and I won't say who because I don't want to get into that, and you can find them if you want to go look, but 2 people with nuclear expertise that have had really good suggestions have perished. One in a car wreck at 46 miles an hour, and it looked like it was doing 130. I don't know what they hit that thing with, but it just flattened it. And another individual that died in a small plane crash. I don't like small planes. They're too easy to bugger over. So people are indeed doing that. And here's the thing. Those individuals that let me put in a little bit of an interesting wrinkle here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll lead into our next subject. A bear, and my number is probably wrong, okay, but within a general sense, about a half an hour's drive or about, say, 40 kilometers to the south west of the Daiichi power plant was the single laboratory in Japan that I've been told, by the way, as an aside, was one of the power plant's primary customers for electricity. But this single laboratory was Japan's only time lab.
Now, can you say who mentioned that to you? Source? No. Okay.
This time lab is, as I've been told, I've been given, I have contacts with some Chinese people that were smart enough to recognize that it's unhealthy to be a billionaire in Chinese descent and in China. And because they have a lot of money, they know things. And this guy owes me some knowledge because I've shared mine with him and he's benefited. And we're good buddies. He's in his late 70s now, and so he doesn't care much. He knows he's going to be dying soon. But anyway, he was telling me some stuff, and he told me about the time lab and their primary contracts and all this kind of stuff, and how curious it was that they were on an expected threshold path, is how he put it, prior to the Fukushima disaster, and that all the scientists that were there recognized that something was up, and they basically all disappeared off the planet. And he knows where 2 of them went, and he wouldn't say, but I think I know, but I won't say. But they basically figured that they were part of the hit, and they took off. And so there were about 7 real top individuals there that you just can't find on this planet anymore. And curiously, you can't find or get hold of or get information to Dr. Anderson anymore either.
That's right. Have you any idea what happened there? I mean, we tried to contact him a while back. I don't know if his website is even down right now, I think. I have no idea.
I've tried various different approaches, and those people that have been kind enough to help me out have also tried various approaches. And the only time I was even, what I want to say is close to successful, I ran into a very hard wall. So I don't know what's going on. But he actually has what I think could be a potential to save our ass, okay? And my idea is half-baked and so on, but it has a good basis in the understanding of how time operates, and as he would validate. And basically my idea is to take these closed time-like loops, his little time bubbles, and to create 3 of them, one inside another, like those little Russian dolls. And the internal one would be the one that would be the power plant for the middle one, and the outer one would be to protect us against the effects. And by doing this duality in a triple fashion, we would be able to concentrate the stuff of time, that aspect of the reality that comes in, and so concentrate the aspect of time and maybe get like 10,000 years worth of disintegration within, a year, 6 months or so. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be a tricky thing to accomplish. But if I'm correct, and he would have to validate this because I don't have any actual experimental knowledge to go on. I only have the mathematics that has been shared with me by some friends. But if I'm correct, in the process of creating the bubble within the bubble approach and using this generator on the inside to power it, in fact, a sphere will be created that will fundamentally shear the realities. It will separate the reality in all directions from the center of it in a radial fashion, and so we could set it up to literally come down and be a sphere that would encapsulate Fukushima. And we'd have to get it close enough and make it big enough that it would scoop out underneath Fukushima and it would isolate it. Everything that was within there would be dead. I'm talking plants, everything would be dead. And I'm unsure of what would happen when we popped that bubble, because it would be a huge dead zone of an incredible level. because of what we would do to it. But no radiation would get out, and all the radiation would decay in a shorter period of time. And then once we'd had it encapsulated, we could sit around and argue and figure the math of what would happen when we opened it up and try some experiments. Because it's really freaky, because see, here's some of the things that you get into. It's really odd. Okay, so I've got some watercress, and I've got Papa watercress and Mama watercress, two different strains of watercress. I cross the watercress, and I produce baby watercress. Baby watercress has a generational seed. I get seeds from that. I take it to seed. I get those seeds. I then take Papa watercress, who still exists because of the nature of the cress plant. You can keep it going. And I take Papa watercress and I put him into a time bubble, and I deprive him of time, or I give him too much time, and basically send him back in time, if you will, so that he doesn't exist anymore. Okay, his DNA is wiped out. It never existed in time. Yet baby watercress doesn't disappear. Baby watercress is still here. But curiously, as soon as we pop the time bubble in which Papa watercress has reverted back to non-existence, the DNA of baby watercress changes.
How does it change? How does it change?
The easiest way for me to explain it is the following. I mean, I can tell you which particular parts of the DNA are affected, which sugars, which polysaccharides, but that doesn't answer the real question. You want to know what's the causal factor, right? Okay, and it's because we've all been wrong about going back and killing your grandfather in time, kind of thing, that we get this wrong. You can go back and kill your grandfather, that's just fine, and you'll come back and you'll be just fine. And it's because of what I've termed the EPN, or ever present now, and its relationship to omni-consciousness. Okay, and so let me put it to you this way. We're standing vibrational waves. The watercress is merely energy that's vibrating in such a way that we perceive it as watercress. But it's the same kind of energy that we are. The same atoms, the same universal consciousness animates its atoms as animates the atoms in my body, and separates its atoms from the air the same way that universal consciousness separates the arm hairs that I've got from the air, so that I don't drag that air along with me. That level of universal consciousness has an existence that's tied to the ever-present now. When they destroyed the Papa watercress, the component of his DNA that ties his EPN to the EPN of his child, baby watercress, that little tiny bit of the DNA is gone. So from that viewpoint, baby watercress is a true orphan in a way we've never seen before. It is actually lacking a constituent component of the EPN addressing of the standing waves that are all of the energy within Materium. This is a very disturbing idea in many ways, and I have just started to noodle on it, and it scared me already to the point where I would rather go out and build my boat.
Now, we didn't get an opportunity to interview Dr. David Anderson before he disappeared off the map, basically, and I don't know how well versed you are in his material, his stuff, but if we just go back to some of the basics here, how would this be done? What is the mechanics involved for us to actually physically do this that you're talking about the bubbles?
Sure.
Yeah.
The bubbles are magnets. I mean, they're just magnetic fields. We're getting very astute with our crude abilities to control magnetic fields. And we find that if you spin magnets one way, you get this kind of field. And if you spin all these magnets together in different ways, you get these other fields. The Russians and Chinese are doing great work with what are called tokamaks, which are magnetic fields that are used to contain high energy reactions, which, for instance, I could create a magnetic field that would allow me to weld inside it, and none of the welding radiation would get out. I don't know if you're a welder, but if you ever weld without your mask, you get that welder sunburn, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that kind of thing is being done routinely now in commercial applications. And real soon we'll see them on local welders being offered around the planet as soon as the Chinese tumble to how to do it on these.
And you say that's actually a manipulation of time, then, to a certain extent.
No. That is a manipulation of the magnetic fields. That's an example of a strong magnetic field dampening radiation at a level that you could perceive, right? Welders that you would not need the full shield, you'd only need eye shielding for. They would emit light, but no other radiation that would hurt, and the heat doesn't really come out. Those are going to be available relatively soon. That's a strong magnetic field application. Now, a stronger magnetic field application is where they make magnetic fields that are so strong that the stuff that is time can't get through. Now, everybody thinks of time as an integral part of reality, and that we're all in this river and we can't get out of it. And nothing could be further from the truth. I have used that example myself to describe time, and it is inaccurate. It is basically as though we are here continuously, always present, and we are being irradiated by sunlight, but at the same time, we're also being irradiated by time particles. And Einstein got to some of this when he did his E equals MC squared stuff, and you start getting, if you convert everything over to joules and actually start dealing with the math, you can perceive how some of the time stuff actually works. And basically, it's an aspect of reality. Now, the Hindus understood it a different way, and they just simply said that time was one of the 66,000 aspects that composed the reality compose the illusion that we all think of as reality. And they're quite correct about that. If you think of time as merely a form of radiation bombarding you, then it makes sense that you could develop a radiation shield that would prevent that radiation from getting through. The harder thing to wrap your head around is how you would tweak that shield to concentrate and focus like a lens and gather more time stuff and shove it into the middle. That's what I'm proposing.
Now, are you talking about tachyons, stuff like this?
No, because that's a grosser form of the energy. We cannot measure the time material even remotely, and we don't even have a lexicon, most of us, that encompasses the level of nuance that is required to discuss time not as a particle, but as it is. So, for instance, we don't measure time. We measure the transit of a photon perceived from one point to its perception on another point. We're measuring our own perception then, not really time.
Meaning, without light, we wouldn't see anything moving. Hence, we couldn't measure anything. Is that the kind of logic there?
Yeah. Okay, and then it gets even worse. Okay, because from my viewpoint, we're all vibrating here at 44,000 times a second, 22,000 times a second, or 44 trillion times a second. 22 trillion times a second, we vibrate into existence, and 22 trillion times a second, we vibrate out of existence. This is the idea of reality. It's this continuous creation-destruction mode, and it could not be otherwise.
Is this sorry to interrupt, the clock cycle of creation, or the existence? Is that what you're talking about? Clock cycle as in computer, meaning you have
No. It's sort of like that. But that clock cycle is a pulse through material that actually continues to exist, right? Okay, so I'm a computer guy. I understand about the clock cycle, the primary cycle, the zero ring, and so on. Mm-hmm. And what actually happens is that you've got hardware there that gets a pulse. So the hardware is just sitting there, and a pulse comes through at a particular kind of a time. What I'm talking about has a subtler degree of nuance to it that goes all the way into what we think of as spirituality, because here's the sense of it. We have a pulse every 22 trillion times a second that actually creates us. It would be as though the computer created itself 250, if it was at 250 hertz, on a 250 hertz cycle, it would create itself in front of your eyes 250 times, and it would destroy itself 250 times every single second. And you would see this occur as you're typing. Now, you can't see that fast, so say it occurred at 30 times a second. You could still type on it. It would still be there. Mm-hmm. Every time you pushed your finger down, the odds would be that you'd actually hit something. But you could actually perceive it because your brain actually is able to perceive things at 30 frames a second. Now, it can't perceive its own creation at 22 trillion times a second. The closer you get to that level of perception through the practices of meditation, etc., the more you are on the enlightenment trail, and you're upshifting, if you will, within the vibrational state that we call reality. And this is just my view of it.
That's an incredible frame rate, and you do need some advanced hardware to have that kind of cycling of it, of course. But okay. What is this? Where does that number come from, by the way? Why 22 trillion? Is this just
No, it's not just out of the air. It's really goofy. But if you meditate, and we're not talking contemplation, we're not talking mantra repetition, we're not talking even vipassana, which is insight meditation. We're talking the stuff that's more akin to Chan, Zen, Nikung, the silent, no words meditation, the actual grasping of reality, the entering of the void. Right. You have the opportunity to do this thing that's called entering the stream. Some people are born, if you read in the Science of Yoga, it actually says explicitly that some people, because of karma, will be born into this life with the ability to do things. They have special powers. They're more psychic than others. They can do things. Some people are actually able to be born into this life, and they just know shit. You know, they can touch a tree, and they know how the tree is doing, right? They touch your hand, and they say, oh, boy, I'm sorry about the ache in your elbow. You know, and how the hell did they know, right? Okay, well, they're operating at that particular level. They're operating at another vibrational level, if you will. Now, if you enter the stream, if you meditate, there are no words, but there is knowledge. It is possible to bring knowledge back. One time when I was meditating, I was able to bring back Avogadro's number. Avogadro's this weird guy who sat around and thought about atoms and reality a lot and speculated on the number of atoms of gas that could appear in a given volume in a given period of time in a given state of that volume. And if you go into Avogadro's number and you look for it and you dig all the way down into ionized hydrogen, you find out that he's got something there that leads you to believe that the frame rate for creation is 22 trillion times a second.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I have since been validated by this because I've had some thinking about this. If it is close to 22 trillion, and I don't give a damn. If you want to tell me it's 46 trillion, I'm quite happy to shake your hand and eat your pie, and I'll believe 46 trillion because I don't care. All right, the number is immaterial. That's a monkey mind thing. But here's the deal. Just to validate the concept, I started thinking, if that's the case, if the frame rate is that high, then there are certain defined limits that I believe would be in existence. And so therefore, one of the defined limits is that humanity, with all of our instrumentation, should not be able to read higher than 1/3 of an order of magnitude of that frame rate. Okay, so my postulate, and I won't go into why I have that postulate unless you really want to, and that's a whole nother hour. But I have this postulate that we would never be able to develop a scientific apparatus that would be able to read faster in hardware than 1/3 of one reduced order of magnitude of that frame rate. So therefore, we'd never be able to read faster than about 9.5 billion clicks a second, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I looked all through everything in literature, sent my spiders out, and aha, I found it. NASA recorded a pulsar, and they used the most significant thing they could find in the way of analysis, and they were actually able to count the thing spinning at 8 billion frames a second.
Jeez.
Okay, so it's
1.5
billion less than my anticipated maximum, but hey, we're getting there, right?
What does that mean? There's like is that a creation point? Is that a source point for something then, or what the hell is that?
Speculation. So you're asking basically a why question.
Yeah,
and I can speculate. I know.
Can't avoid this.
I'm annoying to talk to. I'm just so annoying. You would not believe my poor wife, the suffering she goes through just living with me. But for whatever reason, it's her karma. That's what I tell her. But in any event, so here's the thing. There is indeed a threshold there because at the level of 9.5, and this is my way of thinking, 9.5 billion pulses per second is going to cross the threshold at which our ability to measure the electromagnetic spectrum ends. And it'll still exist, but it won't be we won't have anything in reality and hardware to measure it. We can measure it probably with a concentrated form of consciousness. But you see what I'm saying, right? It's got to be, we've entered into the realm where the only thing we could measure it with would be directed energy because we're at an energetic level that's so fast and intense, it exceeds the ability of hardware to recognize itself.
Yep.
This is actually my basic dispute with all those people running around with that bullshit about giant AI machines running around doing stuff.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, as long as we're ranting and raving on people, might as well rag on them for a bit. Got a bunch of people out there with this story that, the whole world's controlled by these giant AI computers, right?
Yeah.
I've worked in the computer industry. I worked so long ago that my first computer was a K-Pro 2, and it had 4K of RAM, and I operated off of CPM, and I was just thrilled to upgrade to the original version of DOS before Bill Gates bought it from Seattle Computing. So I've been in it for a long damn time. And AI requires something that most people just gloss over. You cannot have consciousness. You can't have artificial intelligence without consciousness, right? Everybody assumes, you look at all these movies, Forbin Project, HAL, any of these things. The being that the human is interacting with is conscious. It is making its own decisions, right?
Right.
You would agree?
Yep.
Okay. A prerequisite of consciousness is emotion in a body. Now, the reason that I say this is that we have rocks that have a certain kind of consciousness. We have trees that have consciousness, but we don't have artificial intelligence levels available in them and never will, nor will we in any of the hardware until we can give that hardware the ability to suffer and to feel pleasure and pain. then I could say, I grant you that this thing is on its way to becoming a being, because it will have the level of predictive ability about its own nature that will allow it to become conscious. So, for instance, if you stab an earthworm with a pin and cause it pain, it will react. But it's not going to predict that it's likely to be stabbed again. Nor will a machine. You can zap a machine with a burst of electricity, and it has no reason to believe that that would ever occur again. It is only at the point that we start using our minds to predict and feel our way through reality that we become conscious. And that consciousness leads us to intelligence, because we start learning things or not. You know, if you don't succeed very well, you don't contribute to the gene pool, and you're out of there.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so yeah, go ahead, finish the thought there.
Computers, we can wire sensors into them. They can read and respond various different types of electrical signals, but they don't in any way internalize, accept those electrical signals as part of themselves. They are not self-aware. As a software engineer, I can tell you right now, it's like an island. All computers. If it isn't there, if you don't bring it with you, it isn't there. It's not going to create itself. You know, computers are not creative beings, and without the ability to do creation, you have no art, you have no intelligence.
I would tend to agree with that. I think that if there is such a thing as being close to an artificial intelligence, it would be a faulty one. It would be a sick one, if you know what I mean. I mean, for instance,
it would also be constrained to the software that creates it.
Of course.
When I wrote software that was the operating system, if I didn't put it into that software, it wasn't going to happen.
Be there. No,
you know what? I was so thrilled to discover Prolog. Prolog is a really cool program, because programming and logic is what it's actually all about. And Prolog has this unique ability among software languages, because you can write a program that, when it encounters new information, can stop and recompile itself and then start itself up again and get going.
Right.
With that new information in it. And even that is extremely limited.
And that was one of the argumentation points, I think, by Kurzweil or one of the other transhumanists, that they suggest that the software itself should be able to rewrite itself, to improve itself, basically, right? So, but you're saying that wouldn't work.
My argument is it can never improve itself. That's a judgment call, and therefore you're going back to the human, the software engineer that said this is good for you to absorb and this is bad for you to absorb. Therefore